And so thank you. We've already prayed, so I'm going to get started. We started this series, Dysfunctional, 2 weeks ago, and we've been looking at the family tree of Jesus. We're hopefully you've been encouraged by this. I'm encouraged by this, that if God chose and used a dysfunctional family tree for his son Jesus, then there's hope for our family, all right? God can use our family too. And so in this series, we're looking at some of the people in the genealogy, and we're looking at what their specific dysfunction is and what lessons we might learn for our lives and for our families. And so today, I think one of the most important ones that we're going to look at for this entire series, I think this is it. This is one of those, and it's the story of Jacob. He's the grandson of Abraham. But before we get to his story, I want to talk a little bit about yours, and that is this. How are the relationships in your life? When you just look around and the relationships in your life, how are they? Right? How are they? And I want to see if you can relate to any of a few different scenarios. Have you ever blown it big time with a friend or a family member and you wanted to say, I'm sorry, but you just didn't know how to start the conversation? Like you had a hard time getting that started, and so you didn't? And then it seemed like they moved on. It seemed like they got over it. And so you didn't say, I'm sorry. And then enough time passed that it would just be weird to say, I'm sorry now. That would be strange. That would be weird. Or have you ever feared the confrontation so badly that instead you just ran? You just ran the other way. And maybe they thought, like, what'd I do? I mean, that because of something you did, you just ran the other way and you kind of ruined or hindered the friendship just because you actually wanted to say, but you couldn't. Have you ever put off a confession or you put off an apology because you knew it would go poorly? Like you just knew that's not going to go well. And maybe you lost sleep over it and you were stressed over it. And then you finally had the conversation and it actually went well. I've had that happen before, that you were so stressed and so anxious about how this was going to go that you just didn't. And then when you did, it was like, oh, like that feels so much better. I wish I'd have done that a long time ago. Have you ever experienced God's grace and had your life transformed and like you knew you were different, but you had a hard time apologizing or asking forgiveness for something you've done in the past because you didn't think that they would think that you were different? And so you didn't, or maybe you just didn't want to, you felt like it would rip the scab off. If you can relate with any of those, I think this message is for you. See, God is a God of relationship. He's a God of relationships, and he desires that we do that well. And he's not glorified when we withhold forgiveness. He's not glorified when we hold on to a grudge. In fact, I think this. We need to get free of the grudge so that we're free to love. Got to get rid of the grudge. And this is something that I'll say a couple times today. We actually have a couple of bottom lines, a couple of things I'll say a few times, but this is one of those. I think that freedom feels better than bitter. If you've ever felt bitter against somebody, can I just tell you this? Freedom feels better, right? Bitter doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to you, and it doesn't feel good to those around you. Now, what does all that have to do with Jacob? We're going to take a flyover look at Jacob's life. I'm not going to read the large chunks of Scripture this morning. I'm going to tell it as a story. You can verify it by going to Genesis, beginning with chapter 25. But if you are following along with our SOAP reading guide, so we put out a SOAP reading guide every quarter so that we can kind of be reading Scripture together. The new one's out there. It started 2 days ago on July 1. Or no, it starts today. I'm sorry. It starts today. This is July 1st, people. And so it starts today. You can pick one of those up. But we're in Genesis chapter 3. Genesis started 2 days ago that we started in that book. And so in just 2 or 3 weeks, about 3 weeks, we're going to catch up with this part of Genesis. But you can pick one up in the foyer. Now, beginning with verse 24, in chapter 25, it says, when the time came to give birth, Rebekah discovered that she did indeed have twins. Now, I love the way it phrased there because she hadn't had an ultrasound, right, back then. And she's just like, I am huge. Like, I know, like, she's big, but I'm bigger, and I don't understand why. And so it says she did indeed have twins. So, like, I think there's something more going on. Yes, there was, Rebecca. You had twins. And so, and this is my favorite verse in this passage. The first one was very red at birth and covered with thick hair like a fur coat. That is like the ugliest baby description that I've ever heard in my life. Like, this baby is red and it's so hairy, it looks like it's covered with a fur coat. I mean, read that in your Bible. The Bible's cool. And so they named him Esau. Esau means hairy. All right? And later in life, he gets a nickname, Edom, which means red. So he was a red, hairy little boy, all right? Just trying to get the picture there. He's like covered with a red fur coat. So they named him Esau. Then the other twin was born with his hand grasping Esau's heel. And so they named him Jacob. Jacob literally means heel grabber. That's what the name Jacob means that. It also means deceiver. But can I tell you, parents, please don't name your children like the first thing you experience with them. You know, oh, he's a red, hairy baby, Esau. Or Jacob, he grabbed his heel. Let's name him heel grabber. Be more creative than that. I think it would be good. Now, Isaac was 60 years old when the twins were born. And then he continues. As the twins grew up, Esau became a skillful hunter. He was an outdoorsman. But Jacob was quiet, and he preferred to stay at home. He was the homebody. He was a mama's boy in every part of that word. And Esau was a daddy's boy. And the reason the Bible even says why Isaac loved Esau more is because he enjoyed food. And Esau provided it, right? So because he went out and hunted and got meat, he's like, oh, that's my boy. You know, he can get the deer, he can get the antelope, he can get the bear, whatever. He's my boy. But Rebecca loved Jacob because she was teaching him to cook in the kitchen. And so they spent a lot of time together. Now, through the years, they had significant clashes. And the Bible records a few of those. And so we're going to look at a couple of those scenarios. According to commentary, somewhere around the age of 15, they had a really big conflict. Esau had been out hunting, or he had been out in the fields. We're not told in this scenario which he was doing, but he was outside, and he had been working really hard. I like to think he was maybe hauling hay, because that's something that I did as a teenager, and you're just like covered and sweaty and nasty, and you come in and you're like, I'm starving. I need something to eat. And I think in this scenario that he was hungry, and he came in the house, and it actually says he was famished, and evidently Jacob had been practicing his stew-making skills. And in this scenario, he was getting good because Esau came in and was like, oh, that's good. Like, I'm starving. That smells wonderful. He's like, give me some of that stew. And Jacob goes, you know, I made some extra. Kind of thinking about you, brother. And so I made some extra. But first, let's negotiate a price. Like, I didn't make this for free. I've been working, slaving all day. And so I need your birthright. You give me your birthright, I give you the soup. How many of you know that's a really bad trade? Really bad trade. And so, and I have never been, maybe you haven't, but this is kind of what I think Esau was saying. In fact, he says this in the verse. He says, what good is that to me? Say that word, now. What good is that to me now? I'm about to die. And so that birthright, I don't get that for years. What good is it to me now? Have you ever been that hangry? Right? That hungry that just in the moment that it's just a whole different level. Because do you understand like what he sold his birthright, what that even entails, the birthright? Let's assume, for the sake of easy math, not the new math, but easy math, $100,000 inheritance. As the firstborn, having the birthright, your inheritance, there was only 2 sons, so your inheritance would be $66,666.66. All right, and then Jacob's inheritance would be $33,333.33. We'll give him 34, just for the sake to round it up to make sure we hit the number. But that would be your inheritance. He sold the bowl of stew so that he gets the 66 1,600. He gets the double portion. And Esau said, what good is that to me now? Like, I don't get that till Dad dies. I want the soup now. Now, that's some expensive soup. I Googled. Google, I need your help. What is the most expensive soup? And I came across a story from Time magazine. Tiato, a Vietnamese restaurant in Santa Monica, California, held an invitation-only dinner and auction. And the bidding started at $5,000 for a single bowl of An Ki Pha soup. An Ki Pha. And the ingredients included A5 Wagyu beef, white Alba truffles, a foie gras broth. And yes, that is how you pronounce it. I had to look that up because otherwise it would have been foie gras for this guy. So I had a foie gras broth, hand-raised bean sprouts, and noodles from a rare blue lobster meat. The winning bid was $5,800. And today, you can go, there's 2 different restaurants in California that you can get this particular An Ki Pha for $5,000. Anytime you want to order it, they will serve you up. I bet they will. Now, Esau's winning bid, though, wasn't $5,000, it was $33,000, right, in our illustration. To be paid in the future. Esau was not about the future. He was all about now. He was hungry now. He wanted to eat some of that soup now. He couldn't imagine having to go another minute without eating now. The inheritance was then. The inheritance was future. The inheritance was not now. And so he was willing to trade something from the future for something right now. Have you ever had that kind of thinking? Has that kind of thinking ever gotten you in trouble, that you're just worried about right now? Now, I can understand. I've had that trouble before. That kind of thinking has gotten me in trouble with a credit card. When I was 18, when I got my first department store credit card, JCPenney credit card. And so I wasn't worried about like when the payment came due, I was worried about, like, that looks good. Like, I like that. And so I'd buy that. And then the bill would come, and I'm like, $200. Where did I do that? And you're like, oh, yeah. I was worried about now. Have you ever done that? That you really didn't think about then. You were just thinking about now. That was Esau. He was all about now. Now, another time, many years later, and we don't know exactly what age the twins were. What we do know is that they were over 40. Right? The last verse of the chapter preceding it said that Esau got married at the age of 40 to foreign women, to Canaanite women, displeasing his parents. And so we know that they were at least 40 years of age. Many commentaries think they might have even been as old as 60 or 70, but they're at least over 40. So Isaac decides, like, I want to make sure that I give the family blessing. That's different than birthright. Birthright was based on when you were born. The blessing was more like our last will and testament. I just want to say a blessing and want to make sure that I say everything I want to say while I'm still alive, and I'm going to give you this family familial blessing over you and everything that comes after you. And so he wanted to make sure that he was able to give this to Esau while he was still alive, and so he gives this plan. Esau, I need you to go out and hunt and kill some meat and bring it back and cook it for me and then come back and feed it to me. How many of you know this is a good story so far? Like, that's a good plan. And he says, you do that, and then after you do that, I'm going to give you my blessing. And so Esau leaves, and he goes to do that. Their mother, Rebekah, Isaac's wife, was listening in, and so she says, Jacob, come here. Go get a couple sheep and bring it in. We're going to kill them. I'm going to cook it up just the way that your dad likes it. He likes a little bit of dressing on the inside. He likes it like glazed on the outside, a little time to sear it on one side, and on the other side he likes it grilled. And so I'm going to do all that. And while I'm doing that, when he gets you some clothes, because Jacob's like, wait a minute, like, I'm smooth-skinned, and he's red and hairy. Like, we know that. That's his name. And so he's going to recognize that there's something up, and he's going to want to touch me, and then he's going to curse me instead of bless me. And mom's got, like, I got that handled. I'm going to take the outside, I'm going to take the the wool, the sheep, the outside skin, and we're gonna duct tape that to your arms and glue it to the inside of your neck, and we got this covered. Now, how hairy was Esau? That like wool, like that was. You're like, oh yeah, that's Esau. I mean, he's a hairy dude. You don't get the name hairy when you're a smooth-skinned baby. So Jacob does that. He gets all duct taped up. They get the food cooking. He brings it in, and he goes, Dad, I've got your food. And he's like, how were you so quickly successful? And Jacob says, God did it. Now, that's something, I haven't said this in the other services. He's blaming God for something that he was doing to lie and deceive his brother. God did it. He blessed me. Your Heavenly Father blessed me, and I was able to do this. No, he didn't. Your mama did this. Anyway, so the plan works. And he goes, the voice sounds like Jacob, even though the story and the smell, like I smell Esau. How bad did Esau smell? I mean, there's just a smell there, like you're wearing his clothes, you smell like rotted out lamb fur, but hey, that's Esau. And so that all sounds like Esau, but your voice sounds like Jacob's. Come here and let me touch you. And he touches the wool, and he goes, yep, that's Esau. It's a great story. And he goes, okay. And he gives him this blessing. He prays this blessing over him. And then Jacob leaves the room. And almost on the heels of Jacob leaving the room, Esau walks in with his cooked caribou or whatever meat he had procured. And he brought it, and he said, Dad, I got dinner for you. And Isaac said, Who are you? He's blind, he can't see. Who are you? I am Esau. And it says he shook. He was so upset he shook. And he said that your brother was here, and he tricked me, and he took away your blessing. Esau exclaimed, no wonder his name is Jacob, for now he has cheated me twice. First he took my rights as the firstborn, and now he has stolen my blessing. Oh, haven't you saved even one blessing for me? Hear the desperation in his voice. Now, did Jacob take something of value from Esau? Can we agree on that? Was it wrong? Like how he did it, was it wrong? Right? We can agree on this. Did Esau develop a grudge over what Jacob had done? You better believe it. Verse 41, from that time on, Esau hated Jacob because their father had given Jacob the blessing, and Esau began to scheme. He's going to scheme the schemer. He began to scheme. I will soon be mourning my father's death, then I will kill my brother Jacob. I would call that a grudge. How about you? I think that qualifies. When you hold a grudge, you're not free to love. You're also not free to be loved. It's hard to receive love when you're holding a grudge. Now, with Rebekah's help, Jacob flees. She gets this sense that Esau is really, really mad, and to the point of killing, and so she sends Jacob to Uncle Laban's house. And I don't have time to develop that story, but the deceiver gets deceived, right? He wants the second daughter, Rachel, to be his wife, and Jacob says, if you'll work for me, Laban says, if you work for me for 7 years, then I will give her to you. And so he works 7 years, and he wakes up the honeymoon morning, the morning after, and he looks over, and it's not Rachel. It's Leah. So he had married the girl, and the veil the night before was the wrong sister. And the Bible says that she had weak eyes. And what that means is she was ugly. All right, that's what it means. She was not pleasant to the eyes. And he had worked all this time working for Rachel, the model daughter, the model wife, and instead he wakes up with the cross-eyed Leah. Okay, I'm sorry, that's what the story's saying. And so he gets mad, and he's talking to his uncle who had deceived him, and the uncle says, it's not our custom. Like, I can't give you the younger daughter first. And so work for me for another 7 years, and I'll let you just have this 1 week with Leah, and then I'll give you Rachel, but you got to work 7 years to earn her. And then he works for an additional 6 years past that to get some livestock. So he works 20 years for the deceiver. The deceiver works for a bigger deceiver. All right, there's your story. Now, Jacob becomes very successful. He has 12 sons. And then he hears God speak to him one day, go back home. Now, it's been 20 years. The Bible says that. It's been 20 years since he fled. And there's one thing that he's first concerned with. Esau. First thing on his mind, when God says, I want you to go back home, the very first thought is, but what about Esau? Like, he was ready to kill me. They haven't spoken or seen each other in 20 years, and Jacob has written a script many times, like what this is going to look like. Like, I'm gonna go up to him with flowers. I'm going to go up to him with food. I'm going to go up to him. He's written this script. I'm going to give him these different gifts, and then he's going to say, none for you, and then stab me through the heart with a spear or with a knife or with a sword. And every single script that he's written ends with Jacob dying. I mean, that's the way he's written the script. He can't imagine a scenario in which he says, I'm sorry that I ripped you off from your birthright and your blessing. My bad. He can't imagine a scenario in which he says that in any way that he doesn't end up dead. 20 years has passed. There's been times maybe he wanted to shoot him a text or send him an email or make a phone call or have a coffee appointment, and he just never did. Probably because none of those things existed. But he didn't make any effort to get with him. Maybe he was hoping that it would get better on his own, but if you learn this, it doesn't. It doesn't get better on its own. Whoever said that time heals all wounds is a liar. It doesn't, right? In fact, it can make things worse when we let bitterness in. Genesis 32, 3 through 5, it says, Jacob sent messengers ahead to his brother Esau, right? This is the best script he came up with. He's like, this is the best thing I can do. And he says, give this message to my master Esau. He's trying to butter him up with language. You're the master, and here's the message. Humble greetings from your servant Jacob. And he tells, until now I've been living with Uncle Laban, and now I own cattle and donkeys and flocks of sheep and goats and many servants, both men and women. I have sent these messengers to inform my Lord, you, of my coming, hoping that you will be friendly to me. His expectation is, you're not going to be friendly. And so I'm hoping that you will be friendly to me. So I'm sending these gifts ahead. Now that was a big step for Jacob. And how would Esau receive the news? Verse 6 says, after delivering the message, the messengers returned to Jacob and reported, we met your brother. He is really, really hairy. I mean, it's like scary. He's redheaded and hairy all over. It's like a fur coat. It's gross. But we met him. He's really nice. And he's already on his way to meet you with 400 men. They're going to throw like a party. It's going to be great. But that news, somehow, it wasn't welcome to Jacob because he saw right through it. This was not an unwelcome party. Right? These are soldiers. This is an army. And so he comes up, plan B. We're going to separate into two different groups so that at least one of my posse will survive. So that's his new script, right? And I think he's kind of digging into that double portion to try to appease his brothers, because then he divides his group into multiple groups, and he sends the first group. This is the plan. This is the script he's writing. I'm going to send the first group in. They're going to have livestock and some gifts, and they're going to come to Esau. And Esau's line, what he's supposed to say in the script is, who owns all these animals? What are you doing? And your line is to say, these belong to your servant Jacob. They are a gift for you, his master. He's coming behind. And then there would be another group that would come, and they would have more animals and more stuff, and they would have the same line. He's coming. He's coming. He's back there. He's coming. And so this was his plan. This is what he wrote out. But it came time for nightfall, right? They hadn't reached Esau yet, and so he goes across the river to talk to God for a little bit. And you know this story, he wrestled with God all night long. This is the context. He's about to meet his brother for the first time in 20 years. He's terrified. He wrestles with God all night, and he's changed. He walks differently after that. He actually has a limp from wrestling with God. His name is changed that night from Jacob, deceiver, heel grabber, to Israel, he who struggled with God. And so he has this transforming experience that night. And here's what happened. And one of the ways that we know that he really was changed is because his whole script changed. Beginning with verse 1 in chapter 33. Jacob looked up and he saw Esau coming with his 400 men. So he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and his 2 servant wives. This is still the same plan so far. And he put the servant wives and their children at the front, Leah and her children next, and then Rachel and Joseph last. Now, in his original script, he was supposed to be back there with Rachel and Joseph, hiding behind all of his servants and wives and children. That's where his position was going to be. But now it's changed. It says, then Jacob went on ahead. He got ahead of the group. And it says, as he approached his brother, he bowed to the ground 7 times. He humbled himself. Then Esau ran to meet him. Now, this was part of the script. Every script he wrote had Esau running to him and thrusting him through with a knife or a sword or throwing a spear. But it says Esau ran to meet him and embraced him, threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, and they both wept. Now, Jacob had been dreading this meeting for 20 years. 20 years he had written a script that had prevented this meeting from ever happening. And don't you think he's lost lots of sleep over it? He had missed out on watching his nephews and his nieces grow up. He had missed out on growing old with his brother. He had missed out on family reunions and holiday dinners, all because he had written a script that said, Esau will never forgive me. And Jacob learned, I think, in this moment that when you assume a grudge, you're also not free to love or be loved. And Jacob had told himself the story that if Esau ever saw him, he'd kill him. But instead, Esau hugs him and embraces him. So it makes me think of this question. What are we forfeiting in our relationships because of the stories that we tell ourselves? They will never. It would not go well. It would just blow up. It would be worse. Because of the stories we tell ourselves, we never even give the opportunity for the relationship to actually be healed. Now, if we leave his story and we come back to ours, what can you learn? What can we learn from Jacob's story? You know, is there someone that like you need to ask forgiveness from? Someone you hurt, someone you wounded, someone you spoke about, someone you lied about, someone you tore down, someone you abused? Is there someone you need to ask? The reality is it may be difficult. It will be difficult to deal with that. And perhaps you've assumed that they would never forgive you, so you have never asked. Because you knew they wouldn't, you just didn't. And you've held on to this guilt, and you have not been totally free. Hear this, you've not been totally free to love or be loved by others because you've held this unforgiveness in your heart towards someone else, or you've held this guilt because of something you did, and so there's not freedom there to love or be loved the way that God wants you to be. Jesus actually spoke about this kind of situation. He tells a story and says, so if you're at the altar and you realize when you're there and you're getting ready to offer a sacrifice, you're getting ready to do a spiritual service, you're in church, and you recognize in that moment that there is someone that has something against you, like you're the one that did something bad, you have something that someone else holds against you, the Bible says you are to get up. Don't even do the sacrifice yet. Get up and go and find that person, and you do your part. I'm sorry. Will you please forgive me? I don't think it's enough to go, my bad. Sorry I stole your birthright. Sorry I took your blessing. It's, I was wrong. I'm sorry, will you please forgive me? It is naming exactly what you did that hurt them, right? And so Jesus gives this example of like, if you recognize it's you, you need to get up and go. Don't let any time pass. If you're at fault and you know it, go to that person and ask forgiveness. Now, I think something that's incredibly important for us to remember is this. My responsibility is the apology. My responsibility is owning my part. My responsibility is asking forgiveness. What I cannot do and what is not my responsibility is how they respond, right? I can't help it. The script I wrote might be true, right? They might not accept that. They may not forgive me. They may hold on to their hurt. They may hold on to their bitterness. That's not my dog, right? That's not something, I don't walk somebody else's dog. That one doesn't belong to me. I'm not going to walk it. And so I can't say that one doesn't, it's not mine. My part, my dog, is to accept my responsibility and ask for forgiveness. But we can't take upon their part. Freedom feels better, I promise. Freedom feels better than bitter. I have to do my part and let Jesus handle the rest. Now, maybe you're not in the shoes of Jacob, in this story at least. Esau had his own issues. We're not going into Esau as much, but in this story, Jacob is really the heel grabber. That's what Jacob means. It is a lot funnier in my head. But in this story, maybe you're more in the shoes of Esau, that you're the one who was hurt. You're the one who was violated. You were the one that was betrayed. You're the one who was sinned against. By holding unforgiveness, and I've said this many times, but I believe this, we keep drinking poison, hoping the other person's going to get sick. But it's doing damage to our soul. It's doing damage to our heart. And so by holding unforgiveness, we're actually staying chained to that person. We can't be free from them because we're holding on to unforgiveness. And so by holding unforgiveness, we actually let bitterness in. We're actually inviting bitterness in. Hebrews 12:15 says, look after each other so that none of you fails to receive the grace of God. Watch out that no poisonous root of bitterness grows up to trouble you, corrupting many. Like it doesn't stay to itself, right? The reason you have a hard time loving being loved is why? Because you have unforgiveness. Because you've allowed this bitterness in, it's hard to receive and to give love the way that he wants you to. Now, I have here a glass container with clean, pure water in it. This is representing you, all right? You at the start. I mean, things are pure and clean. Your heart's good. This is the beginning of marriage, right? Everything's great. They smell good. They look good in the morning, right? All the lies we tell ourselves. No, not a lie, not a lie. So. But this is representing my heart, my soul, my life. And then, you know, we have a little fight. Maybe you haven't had one, but you probably have. And so you had kind of a hard time with forgiving them and moving on. And so it's just kind of faint at first. You know, it's just a little thing, but we didn't forgive. We held on. And then it was somebody else. You know, somebody else kind of messed with me. Somebody else kind of did me wrong. And then it was somebody else, and I kept building up this unforgiveness, and it just kept getting more and more and more. And all of a sudden, that which was right, and that which was clean, and that which was pure has been polluted. And my heart isn't free to love and be loved the way that it was. It's been hurt, it's been damaged, and bitterness has creeped in. Ephesians 4:29 talk about let no foul or, hear this, polluting language. The way we speak about other people pollutes our soul. Right? Let no foul or polluting language, nor evil word, nor unwholesome or worthless talk ever come out of your mouth. Whether it's in the privacy of your own home or whether you're speaking to somebody else, don't let it come out of your mouth. It pollutes your soul. James 3:11 and 12 says, can clean water and dirty water both flow from the same spring? Does fresh water come from a well full of salt water? I want this to be, this is your well, right? This is our life. It represents our life. It's our well. And, you know, what's in what's in your well? What's on the inside of you? And one of the ways that we can tell what's inside is what flows out. Is it life-giving words that flow out of us? Is it grace that flows out of us? Is it kindness that flows out? Or is it bitter words? Is it victim stories of all the people that have done me wrong and they did this and they did that? Is that what flows out of us? Salt, water, angry words, bitter words. Proverbs 18:21 says, words kill. Words give life. They're either poison or they're fruit. Hear this part. You choose. That's part of the verse. That's not me adding, hey, you choose. No, this is what the Bible says. Words kill and words give life. They're poison or fruit. You choose. Proverbs 10:11 says, the mouth of a good person is a deep, life-giving well, but the mouth of the wicked is a dark cave of abuse. You know, most marriages and friendships, they start off by being life-giving wells. We speak well of one another, right? We speak kindly to one another. Hopefully they at least begin that way. If not, that was a dysfunctional beginning, but we at least should start that way. But you know what? They can evolve into dark caves of abuse. So are you polluting your well by holding on to unforgiveness? Are you afraid of their response? And so we just don't. See, I think this is true too. The fear of their response keeps us from the freedom of the release. Like you've been dragging this huge, heavy weight with you, right? They're chained to you. You can't release them. And as soon as you forgive and you unlock the handcuffs, all of a sudden there's freedom. It's freedom movement. I'm not chained to them any longer. I'm not thinking about them 20 times a day and if I saw them, if I did this, and I wish that would have been different. We're not thinking about it, and we've released them, right? Can I tell you, freedom feels better. Freedom feels better than bitter. Let's learn the lesson that we picked up from Abraham last week, Jacob's grandpa. Like the fear of the response keeps us from the freedom of the release. Let's learn the lesson and let's do it afraid. Doesn't matter if you're afraid, do it anyway. Doesn't matter if you're scared, do it anyway. Do it afraid. And forgive. Do you want clean water in your well in your life again? Then you have to forgive. Because here's the truth. You come into a different relationship, and this is your well right now. You come into a different relationship and you reach into your well to give that person what you have. All you have is what's in there. So you can't give out of your well what's not in your well. And so we reach into this well that's inside, and all we have to give them is brokenness because we've allowed bitterness to poison our well. You can only give out what you allow in. Now, I want to conclude in a different way than I did from the other two services. I want to look at the rest of the story. Because really the assumption at this point is, and they lived happily ever after. Can we be real? Sometimes you do everything that you're supposed to do, and it doesn't live happily ever after. And in this case, it wasn't Esau's fault, it was Jacob's. This is what happened. They embrace, they hug, they kiss. You got to think there's a little bit of a party. Can't believe this happened. And then Esau says, let's travel together. Like, this is where we were going anyway. This is where we were supposed to meet. I just came a little early to welcome you. A little welcome party, 400 soldiers. And so let's travel together now. And we'll go there together. And Jacob says, you know what? I've got some little ones. I've got some sickly animals. We're just going to drag you down. We're going to pull you back. And so you go on ahead. We'll meet you. We'll meet you there. And so Esau's like, okay. And so he heads where they're supposed to go, and he goes there. And Jacob goes, can I tell you, I think he didn't fully, even though he's like, this was way too easy. Like, I didn't deserve that. I don't trust that he really forgave me. And so I'm going to go off this way. I'm going to run. He really still didn't learn the lesson. And you know what? Esau, he marries a daughter of Ishmael. The whole Middle East crisis is really because there was no forgiveness and grace between Esau and Jacob. There wasn't full healing. Jacob doesn't believe Esau. It was too easy. This wasn't the script that I'd ever written, so I can't trust the outcome. And somehow it's still not healed. You can do everything that you're supposed to do, and maybe the other person doesn't receive it. In other words, the other person might receive you and offer you grace, and you can't receive it. So I'm just being real that sometimes it doesn't have a nice little bow on it, happily ever after. That doesn't absolve us from doing our part. I think Jacob stopped short of doing his part. Esau did his part. Esau ran and hugged him and embraced him, and Jacob went, run. So the way that we're able to get rid of bitterness in our well, though, is when we meet the living water. Right in John chapter 4, and I'm not going to tell that part of the story this morning, but the woman at the well, by the way, do you know which well it was? Jacob's well. It's where the woman at the well, at Jacob's well, meets Jesus. And Jesus lets her know that if she wants living water, the way to get all the pollution out of our life, if I had a fountain above this morning and just kept pouring in clean water, guess what's going to happen? It's going to force out all the pollution. I almost dumped it all over the floor here, but it would just, that's a different way to get rid of the pollution. But if we just kept pouring in clean water, it's going to force out all the pollution. And Jesus says, if you want clean, pure water, he says, I am the living water. So let me in and let me flush all that out. Would you bow your head and close your eyes with me this morning? The prayer team's going to come. Here's the part I want you to think about. Don't put it off for 20 years like Jacob did. Don't walk with that burden. Don't walk with that baggage. Is there someone that you need to ask for forgiveness? Is there someone you need to forgive? Do you need to receive the forgiveness and grace of Christ and allow the living water in? Our prayer team's going to come up this morning, and they're going to be down here as we sing this last song. And among the words are these: free at last, he has ransomed me. His grace runs deep. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. And then it says this: who the Son sets free is free indeed. I am a child of God. So if you want to be free, if you want forgiveness, if you want to be able to forgive, I think it has to do with allowing the living water to flow into our lives, to come to Jesus. So I invite you this morning that if you're feeling like this desire to go, but you're feeling fear, can I tell you this? Can I challenge you with this? Do it afraid. What if the key to your freedom was up here? What if? And so the fear of the response could keep you from the freedom of the release, but not if you do it afraid. Join me in standing this morning as we sing this last song, and I encourage you to find a place. If you need forgiveness or you need to forgive someone, find a place. If you need help this morning praying for that, one of our prayer team members would love to pray with you, but let's do that as we sing.